What is going on, everybody? That's how the guest of today's episode starts his YouTube videos. He's not just one of the best Python educators, not just the best machine learning educators, but also someone who's built amazing projects in public. Also, someone who is really a teacher of the top down learning approach. The Sentdex, Harrison Kinsley. I'm so excited to be releasing this episode. We talk about Harrison's journey as a founder, as an entrepreneur, even through the early days of running an online business by selling in-game cash in his childhood, to today running a YouTube channel, his journey as an educator, his journey as a content creator, his journey as an author. We also discuss his book, which I highly recommend. We also discuss how the R&D happens at these Sentdex labs. Our friends at NVIDIA were kind enough to help make this podcast happen. We also discuss how the DGX box has been helping him. And I also got an early peek at Grand Theft Auto. Do check that video out if you haven't. If you want to know more about the DGX station, please check out my interview with Charlie Boyle. I also have one small message for everyone. I know this took a little longer. That's because I had a back injury. The message I have for everyone is I recently lost a good amount of weight, about 80 pounds, 35 kgs, if I'm doing the conversion right. And I always assumed my back pain was associated with my weight. But turns out that's not the case. I've recently learned about working out, and turns out maintaining good posture while working out is also really important. I'm sure you would be doing this, but if you aren't, please look at some tutorials on YouTube on how to do the exercises in the correct fashion. And also please consider investing in a good chair, unlike me, who used to just grab a dining chair earlier. This was quite expensive, but I think it's worth it for the long term. This is not sponsored, by the way. Please take care of your back, and please watch Sentdex's videos. Towards the end, he says, don't worry, just code. So please don't worry, just code, just do data science. Go watch Sentdex's videos. They'll provide a lot of value to you. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on your podcast platform of choice, or a comment on YouTube, or simply connect with me on Twitter. You can find the links in the show notes. For now, here's my conversation with the Sentdex, Harrison Kinsley. Please enjoy the show. I'm really excited, and it's really an honor to be speaking to the Sentdex, Harrison Kinsley. Harrison, thank you so much for saying yes to my request.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So I have so many things I could possibly ask you, but I want to take you back to your early days of starting as an entrepreneur. If I may, you were selling in-game cash for a game called Dunscape. Can you tell us more about that journey? How did you start in the world of business and selling stuff online?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it depends how far back you want to go, but yeah, I got good at buying and selling things in this game, and so I made a lot of money doing that. And then I used to go to these, I don't know if they even exist nowadays, this thing's called like LAN arcades, and you would just go and hang out, and like I would just like log into my account, and like people would see it, and then people would start like offering like to buy it, because you could just trade over the gold, right? And so I started to find out, this was like the first time I realized that you could like make money on like computers, because even at this time, like by the time I started really selling, I think maybe was 2004, 2005. It might have been a little later than that, but somewhere around there, where this was kind of like a foreign concept to like somehow be making money online, especially as a kid. So yeah, so like that's kind of how it all got started. And that was really the first time that, like I said, like I realized like you could actually like make a business and like earn a living on computers. And like for sure, like my parents like totally did not understand this concept, and like they really wanted me to go out and get like a real job, earning like $5 an hour, but I was making like $20 an hour playing video games, you know,
as a kid in his early teens.
Yeah. And they started at one point, they decided I was just spending way too much time on the computer. So, they told me, well, you have to bring your hours down. So they would let me spend maybe like 2 hours a day on the computer. And this obviously was not enough. I wanted to spend more time. And it was it was fun. Like I was playing the game, but I also, to me, it was so clear that I was working. But like to them, it was like, this can't be work. This will never, like, you could never put this on a resume. You could never get a job like this, you know? But anyway, so they brought my time down. And so to like remedy that, so it was mostly a cash business selling the gold. I mean, there was PayPal, but for the most part, you would just exchange cash at like the LAN arcade. So and people would like text you and be like, hey, I need more gold. I'm sure if my parents ever saw my text, they would think I was drug dealing or something, and gold was meant something else entirely. But anyway, so I had all this cash, and so I just rode my bicycle to Best Buy, and I bought a laptop and a wireless router, and I hooked that up to the modem. And like my parents like everything nice and clean, so the modem was actually like tucked away in like the worst place ever for a modem, but it was in a cabinet. So I just like, I took the router and I put the router in the cabinet, and it was good enough to make it to my bedroom. So I had a laptop and then the wireless router and all that to the computer in my bedroom. And so I just carried on my working in my bedroom. And that worked for a few years until my parents, one day I come home from school, I get off the school bus, I go up, I'm getting ready to go to work. And I used to keep the laptop like in a drawer. So I like opened the drawer and the laptop was missing. And immediately I knew.
Oh
I was
no.
like, oh no, they found the laptop.
So that was the end of your first business, if I may.
um, I don't remember. I definitely was grounded for some time, and I don't actually remember the full ramification. Like it was pretty quick. I think at some point my parents, like especially at that moment, my parents started like they got more interested in what are you actually doing here, and they started to learn more that like I was actually making a living doing it. They still thought it was important that I would go get like I did have a summer job at as like a waiter bartender kind of thing at like a country club, and then I was also a waiter and bartender at like a restaurant for a little bit. So I did do those things, but I think at some point they started to realize that, oh, you actually like this, maybe this is the future. You know, it took them a while, but yeah, I know they took the laptop away, and I know they took like I was probably grounded for some period of time, but I don't recall like it always being an issue that I was fighting them. But I think somewhere around there it kind of started to fade away.
But and in one of your Q&As, you mentioned at that time, just to make some side cash, you were also waiting tables, and that place just went out of business, and you decided that
Mhm.
I should just probably take over and start taking care of my website by myself.
Yeah.
How?
So when I was in college, I was also working as a waiter, and then I was still somewhat in the video game stuff, but by
And I'm
then
sorry for the audience. I imagined you would have gone to Stanford or MIT just to study development. For the audience, can you tell us what your major was?
yes, well, so I had no idea like what did I want to go to school for, and again, I think um I've just never really done like I've always tried to think through like what do I really want to do rather than just kind of like going through the motions. But with college, it was like, well, you have to go to college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I just picked criminal justice as my major, and then I basically did pretty much all of the required classes for that major in like the first year and a half, and but after that first year and a half, I just realized I don't like this. And then by then it was just too late. Might as well keep the major. But then I decided to double major in philosophy. So then I did that. And obviously there's no like direct career for philosophy other than maybe law school, or you could like take it to business, or you could be like a philosophy professor, or like the career prospects for philosophy are definitely short. So but I was interested, like I liked reading philosophy. I liked the critical thinking aspect of it. I liked the debate and argumentative aspect to it. So I just ended up going with that, and I think that was I before I lost the job as a waiter. But that basically that all kind of happened around the same time in college, like sophomore-ish year.
Okay. And you picked up the book. I probably should start by asking you at, I think in your university, you did a few courses on economics, and that's how the idea of Sentdex came together. Can you tell us more about that? And what did you have in mind when you created the channel name Sentdex and the website?
Right. So yeah, getting back to the obviously the RuneScape stuff. initially that was, you would like trade players, like you would manually trade another player for things, and then I would just, this is the stereotypical buy low sell high kind of thing. And then I don't know when, I don't know the year it came out, but eventually this like exchange came out for the game where it's like a stock market ish, where you could like buy and sell stuff at this exchange, and it was much quicker, much higher volume, kind of lower margins. And that was kind of my first understanding of like playing like market trends and paying attention to news. It was all video game stuff, but kind of similar ish. And so from there, then kind of like my first internet business that wasn't just buying and selling like gold basically became selling like tools and advice for investing in that video game. And then somewhere around there, I just decided like I didn't like being tied to that game. Like at any point, especially if you're selling gold, like it's against the terms of service, like you could just get banned, right? and like at some point, I think you have to grow up. So I wanted to get into, the next thing was like stocks. Like I've just always been like drawn to like just data, and like finance was always kind of like a great field for, there's lots of data that you can play with things, and you get like instantaneous results in terms of like were you right or wrong and stuff. So I was just always like drawn towards that. So yeah, like I took some economics classes and stuff, and then I decided, I started trading like manually, like day trading, and just kind of like recognize, like I'm sure many people do, that like news plays a huge factor in like stocks going up and down. And then I just started to wonder if, like if you could like somehow have like a moving average of like sentiment, right? I didn't know there was a word for it. And I think even back when I started Sentdex, I'm not really sure, like their sentiment analysis definitely was coined by somebody before I started messing with it, but it was a pretty like young concept at that time. But I knew that's what I wanted to do. And at that point, I didn't know how to program or anything. Like I had wanted to learn how to program. I had tried to learn how to program when I was like 15 and stuff. And I just like could not figure it out. Like it just didn't make sense to me. And so I just never learned. And then when I thought about this, I was like, well, this is definitely a programming task. And like at the time I had been paying somebody to do like the web development stuff and programming stuff, but he did not like this kind of stuff. He wasn't interested in it. So he was never going to learn how to do this stuff. So then I was like, well, I guess I'll try this programming thing again. But yeah, that was again, like sophomore year in college that I did that.
Gotcha. I'll probably come back to this topic about how do you go about learning all of this stuff. But before that, I have a heavy question on my heart. I'm a biker. You started your channel by uploading a video of yourself riding along Highway 143. What happened to that? Why did you trade that bike for Lego?
It was a lot of Lego. It was a good deal. I made money on that deal, and then I bought another motorcycle. So I bought a better motorcycle from that deal. So yeah, I think that was I think it was like Highway 149 or something. I can't remember for sure, but yeah. What kind of bike do you have?
I have a 160cc. Super bikes don't make sense in India. It'll probably just go off the road. At least me, I'll just go off the road.
Are they even legal? Like, can you, because I seem to recall, like for sure in like Europe and stuff, I think like a lot of those like super sports aren't even like legal bikes, or maybe it's Asia or something.
I mean, people do have them here, but we're pretty flexible about the regulations. Like I'm always driving on the wrong side of the road. I've got a few speeding tickets at this point, so I am not the best person to ask.
Yeah. Well, I think on like the street, you really don't like, I think my favorite motorcycle for like riding on the street was the one that I sold, was that like 650. And even that's a lot, but I think it was just a more comfortable bike. Like if I ever got back into motorcycles, I would like to have like a dual sport. So you can like, I would just ride it 2 trails and stuff like that.
Makes sense.
The sport bikes were fun. And like I did some track days and stuff with sport bikes, but there's just like the downside risk of motorcycles. It's definitely like one of those young man things where I think you're like underestimating the risk or something. And so, yeah, I think eventually, yeah, I don't think I'll ever actually get a sport bike again. I still miss them.
That breaks my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, if I had like a private track, maybe. But even then, like I don't know how much more digging you've done, but like I got into cars after that. And the thing with car, like you can actually push, right? And if you go off and you go into the grass in your car, like it's okay.
You're
Like
still good.
yeah, you're fine. You get back on track and you're good to go. And like no, it doesn't matter. I mean, the worst case scenario is you hit a wall or something, and now you got to fix the car. But at least you don't have to fix your body. I mean, like obviously there are some times where you could have a bad enough crash where you would, but like on the motorcycle, man, it's like almost every time. Or and like like at the motorcycle just track days where people are just going out to have a fun time. No one's racing, like every event, somebody was getting taken away in the ambulance. I think in all of my like car track days, I'm probably motorcycles. I did maybe 10 or 15 total, track days. Whereas in cars, I've probably done like, I don't, 100 might be the number.
100.
I don't know exactly, but a lot. And I think I've seen the ambulance like one time take someone away, and they were in far better condition than like every motorcyclist that ever got taken away. So it's just, I don't know. I think it's almost just as fun, and you can push yourself harder. So it's still so for that reason, I think it's fun. But there is something special about like being out in a motorcycle, like that close to the elements, and like
It's
I
very
don't know.
addictive as well. Like I would just find the lamest excuse to go on a ride. Like these days, I'm not going out because we're in a pandemic. But it's very addictive due to some reason.
Yeah, there's just something special about like the two wheels and like just being in the open air. I mean, I get it, but also people are, it's just so dangerous. And like I don't know, like even not ignoring like the track days, I don't know. I think I had motorcycles for 4 years. I don't know, none of my other friends never crashed, right? Like everyone has crashed their motorcycle and or has been hit or something, right? And or let me ask you, like, have you ever crashed?
I did have fun accident, and like any Indian driver, I'd say it wasn't my fault, and it wasn't, at least from my perspective, but just once, and luckily it
Right.
wasn't
Well, it
too
doesn't have, but
bad.
that's the whole point, and that's why like that was always like before I got into riding motorcycles. Like my parents were, like, hey, we think you'll be safe, but you got to pay. Like it's other drivers too, and that's, I think that's your biggest risk, really, is other drivers and like potholes or other stuff. Like if you ride at night, there's been plenty of times where I'm riding at night and it was, maybe you're going 60 or 70. Well, there's no way your headlights are not going to catch the
Yeah.
pothole before you catch the pothole. So yeah, I think there's just certain things. And then now as I got into like cars and understood more of like, I never took care of my motorcycle myself. I did like oil changing and stuff like that, but nothing like serious. And then and with cars, I did a little bit more of like my own work, and I just like
You
started
install a lift in
realizing,
your garage as well, and I think you mentioned you want to start a channel, but just because it's so hard, I can imagine how hard it is just to film all of that stuff.
well, it's also, yeah, it's hard to film that stuff, and then it's also I think it's important, especially like today. Like I think more and more people are like their whole life is content, and like if anything can be content, then it's going to become content. And I think you have to be really careful of that, because like, yeah, like when I do like track days or like the racing thing, like I did one video of one of the races that I did, and I like that, and I like going back and watching that video, because it's like it like helps me to remember that awesome time. Same reason why anybody takes like photos. So I do like that. But would I want to like record every time I went everywhere?
Hmm.
And like really even that track day or the race video, that was just me narrating it later, because there's always a dash cam and a rear cam running in the race car anyways. So it's like, I could do that, and it wasn't like ruining my event. Like at the event, at the race, I spent no time talking to a camera. I was just focused on having like that event and enjoying that time. Whereas like I think like especially like, yeah, like working on cars or doing other stuff, any of my other hobbies, I kind of want to just enjoy them by myself or with my wife or whoever I'm with, instead of like trying to monetize like every aspect of my life. But I get it, like why people do it. But yeah, I think you have to like protect sections.
For the audience, I think it was the 10th or 11th Q&A where Harrison has this style of his like thumbnail, and the other one is called, I think, what is it like to race on a track day? I'll have those linked in the description. But what I was trying to allude to, and just as you mentioned, you later on narrated this, did you always enjoy this camera presence? You did mention that you're an introvert and this doesn't feel as intimidating to you. But did you always, in retrospect, enjoy teaching? You've taught us a lot through your channels.
Yeah. No, I don't think I was really, I can't think of a time. I mean, other than I mean, like the like tools and advice thing for like the RuneScape stuff was kind of like teaching, but not really. And yeah, I'm like totally, I'm 100% introverted, and like, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm absolutely like antisocial, but I just don't like there's, in general, social things will drain me rather than like fill me with energy. Sometimes they do. And like, especially like if we're going out with people, like maybe like one other one other person or up to like three. But after that, like if we're in a group of like six or more, it's just like all I'm hearing is just noise. Like the worst place in the world to me is like going to like a bar with like 6 or 7 people. I can't hear what anyone, I honestly, like it just all sounds like white noise to me at that point. And I just kind of sit back and drink at that point. So yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, when I'm like filming a tutorial or something like that, like it's not like you're actually conversing with 10,000 people or however many people are eventually going to watch a video. And the same thing, I think the same thing would be true if you were like up on a stage too, though. Like I might get like jitters before I would get up or something, but that's not the same, I don't think, as like, I don't know, there's something different. Like if you're up on a stage or you're in front of the camera, like you're already like, I don't know, in charge or something. There's not actually a conversation happening. So, or there's not like there's really not an interaction. It's just like a one-way street, I think. Or I don't know how to explain it, but I definitely like, I just don't, I guess when I think that I'm like introverted, it's more of like, I just don't seek out trying to like go out and party or like be in big groups of people, stuff like that. And I don't need it, except for like COVID was kind of weird for me because like for the first like 4 months, I'm like, this is fine. And then at some point I'm like, okay, we have to go out, and like I'm dying here, like
I had the exact same experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely have limits for sure. And like, I started to like miss my family and stuff like that. Like I'm sure everybody did, but yeah.
And just the fact that I was trying to point out to was you've built this amazing community, and you mentioned there's not a lot of interaction, but as I was combing through all of the comments, I realized you do answer quite a lot of the questions, and at least the ones that you find interesting from whatever date. I'm sure you just spend a good amount of your day just trying to interact with your community.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much read, I read every comment. I don't necessarily respond to every comment. And like, I see people like say that you shouldn't read comments and stuff. And I think maybe just in general, the comments are pretty, I would say like 98% of comments are like good comments. Like if you're not reading your comments, I don't know, I get a lot of good feedback and like positive messaging and like that kind of stuff. Like I think reading the comments is beneficial. And then especially like when I started out, I would learn a lot, like from what people would say, or they would correct things, or be like, hey, have you heard of this? Like, and that's still happening, where like, especially like when we did the book, for example, basically kind of checked out for a year. Like I wasn't really paying attention to anything that's going on in the world. And so it was kind of useful to like, when I come back, there's like certain comments where people have asked multiple times, have you seen XYZ thing? And then I'm like, okay, so at least I know what to go look for next, And so like, I think in terms of like getting good ideas and, or just feeling good, like when you read comments, there's a lot of positivity there. So I don't know why people always say, don't read your comments, but sometimes there are some crazy comments, or like really rude, or just crazy comments. But I think you just have to ignore those, or you can right click and hide that user from the chat. Like there's so many things. Like just don't, you don't have to read it. You can just remove it. Like you don't have to spend any time on them if you don't want to. So yeah, but even in that scenario, I don't know. I don't think, it's kind of like lots of people are active on like Reddit or Twitter, um, but that doesn't mean that they're like super extroverted in real life. It's
Yes.
probably the opposite. So that's my guess.
For sure, I tweet like every 5 seconds, and if put me in a room with people, I probably wouldn't have a good time having a conversation.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I think I think what makes it different is like in person, like your exchanges are like when someone says something, you have to immediately reply, like you're going back and forth quickly. Whereas like if you're tweeting or making a comment or making a reply to a comment, or you're filming a video, like you're I don't know how to phrase it, but like it's not the same. It's just not the same. Like you have plenty of, like there's time to think about what to say or how you want to phrase something, or like you don't have to like think that much quickly about how you want to interact with somebody, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how to put it into words, but it's definitely different. It's different than like talking to somebody in real life, for sure.
Talking about, I'll use this as a segue. Talking about recording videos, you've put together so many, if I may, courses, tutorials, 1,000+ videos. It was really hard to just scroll through it because I was just running out of RAM, and as I was trying to find all of your videos. And the thing I learned through, I think one of your Q&A was, it's all organic audience that you're getting. So was there ever a vision for the channel you're building, or how did you want to really put all of this together? It for you has fortunately worked out very well in terms of supporting yourself as well. But I think on Reddit you mentioned that it was never the intention that you want to use this as a marketing channel of some sorts.
Well, I kind of did, like when I first started, the thought was, and that's where the Sentdex name comes from, is sentiment index. And that was for Sentdex.com, which was the stock sentiment analysis, which later became also like politics and then like geographic sentiment. Um, so I started off the channel thinking, here's what I'll do. I'll share with people um, some of the things that I've learned as I'm programming. Because especially like nowadays, I feel sorry for anybody who wants to try to start a YouTube channel teaching Python, because there's like the competition is so high. I mean, there's just so many people doing the same thing as each other that I don't know how you could separate or be different. But at the time, there was like Bucky at the New Boston and no one else. I mean, there would be like random channels doing random things, but really no good source. And like even the videos that I was finding on like, I just want to read a CSV file. Like how can I read a CSV file? Like that was it. And you really couldn't find good information on like how to do that either on YouTube or in text form. And so, I mean, I'm sure it existed, but there was no good source for it. And when I would find them, at least, like I was not, like I didn't go to school for CS or anything related to doing programming. So I didn't know anything. And so all I wanted to do was like, hey, I figured out how to do this cool thing with this language that I learned. I just want to share it with people who are like me, who when they go and they're hearing all these terms like attribute and stuff, like I don't know what that means. And I can help people like be more productive and do cool things. So that was kind of like, and while I did that, I could just kind of sort of plug Sentdex.com, because we would wind up doing a lot of finance related stuff and like it would be related. So I thought maybe that's all it would be, was just like I could just share some of this stuff and then sort of get some marketing on the side for Sentdex.com possibly. And then it just kept evolving from there. I just kept like, anytime I would like learn a new thing, I would go on YouTube and just kind of like share, hey, here's what I learned, here's how to do it. And I think part of the reason for the success was because it was so fresh to me, and because I like had the like complete newcomer's perspective. It was just, people could actually come to my videos and learn the thing that the title said. And so I think that it just kind of like worked out. That really wasn't like a grand master plan. It just, that's just what happened. And so basically that's pretty much all I've continued to do is I just share videos on whatever I'm interested in. So if I'm interested in something, I'll research it, I'll try to learn it. If I do figure it out, then I'll share it. But and it's definitely evident like when I try to like go back and do like revisit Flask or revisit Django or revisit the Python 3 basics, there's no question that like I miss things because it's like, oh, I just, it's so obvious to me now, like why this makes sense or why you would do X, Y, Z. But, you know, when I was first getting started, it really wasn't. So I was good at teaching those things back then because it was just fresh. Like I understood the newcomer's perspective. And so like now I'm probably like the tutorials like with Python 3 basics. If I tried to make one today, it would be probably very similar to my struggle initially where I'm like, I don't know what those words mean, man. You know, like you got to go back, you got to go even more basic, you know. But now for sure on my channel, if I did that, I think people would riot. They don't want that anymore.
But that's such a powerful thing that you were just creating content for yourself for from a few weeks ago, and it was just your notes or your learnings that you were putting out. I think it's like someone mentioned on Twitter that it's like putting out a bad signal to the world just to attract people that are similar to you. That's what video creation is like. So that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. And for sure, like with the topic of like it being notes, like I still go back to like every time I make a new Flask website, I still go back to my first Flask video or Flask tutorials and like grab all that starting code, you know, because that it's just easier that way. And there's a lot of like, you know, things that I do commonly or common functions that I know where I use that function and I'll go back and like grab that function and stuff. And or even like recently I tried to do the TensorFlow object detection and I went to my tutorial because it's like personalized notes for myself and I just share them with people, but it's for me just as much as it is for everyone else.
And just zooming out a bit, how would you plan all of these? Because you made, I think on Twitter you mentioned that you made a decision to not cut out your mess ups on the video. You mentioned you're an intermediate Python programmer. I'm sure you'd say you're an expert now, but what's that planning process like? Or has it changed at all when you're creating all of these tutorials?
It really depends. I definitely still would consider myself like an intermediate like I'm really not a good programmer. That probably sounds funny, but I don't think I'm actually a good, like I know a lot of tools and I know how to take tools and make a thing. Like I'm good at that. I'm an expert at like building an idea, right? I'm good at that. But as far as like actually like programming, I don't think I'm that good at it. I mean, I'm good at like I can make it happen, but I don't think I'm an expert. But as far as planning is concerned, it really depends. So like the neural networks from scratch videos, those are heavily planned, heavily edited, and like a lot of effort goes into those. And because we want that, because that topic is so complicated already that I think like making mistakes or being sloppy or not putting in a lot of forethought into like how do we want to structure this and like what order do we want to go in and stuff like that, I think just makes it harder to understand. Rather than being a teachable moment. Whereas like with a lot of things, they're not hard. It's like, you just need to follow these series of steps and you'll get there. But along the way, you're probably going to make a lot of the exact same mistakes that I make on video eventually. And so it's, in my opinion, just better to leave them in there. And as far as planning goes, it really depends. Like some stuff, like the GPT stuff recently, that was like basically zero planning. It was just like, okay, let's just tinker and see what we come up with. And then other stuff I might make like notes and like build out the program, but not really think how I'm going to teach it yet. And then some, I'm trying to think like with Django, for example, or like Flask, a lot of times I would probably build out the entire website. And then I would think, okay, how do we separate this into chunks that would be accessible and like not, you know, not too long, not too short, that kind of stuff. So it really just kind of depends on like what the topic is going to be, I guess, and like kind of where I'm at with the channel, because I don't know, like I might still eventually go back and revisit things like Flask and Django. But nowadays it just feels kind of silly to like go back and like revisit all those things, or like matplotlib or like some of these other things. Like, why would I go back and do those again? I don't know. It feels like kind of silly at this point to like go back to those. So probably going forward, it would be more like project based stuff is my guess. But then how much planning that goes in, I don't, probably not very much. That's my guess. But neural networks from scratch will still stay planned, and I'm sure there will be like other stuff that I would plan out in more depth. But yeah, it just kind of depends on the topic, depends how I'm feeling that day.
If I could request you to grab the book that's right under the DGX box behind you, and if you could just tell us how did this idea come about in your head of writing this book? Why did you decide to write this book at all?
So yeah, so the lovely neural networks from scratch book. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, well, definitely. So I think the first time that ever came up was when I did this like machine learning series where we built like a bunch of the more traditional machine learning models from scratch, like k-nearest neighbors and stuff like that. And then when we got to neural networks, I was like, well, we're not doing that from scratch. So we used I don't even know if it was Theano back then. It might have been, it was something. It was not, I don't think it was TensorFlow. I can't remember what we used.
I think so.
Yeah. Anyway, it just seems silly to do it from scratch because it would just take so long, and I don't think we could make that could be done and I could like earn a living, right? It would just be so few people would be interested in that. And for the amount of effort that would be required. So that was always like on the back burner to like do neural networks from scratch, but like how would we really do it? Like I just couldn't think like how can it get done? And then I don't know, I think the machine learning playlist was before Daniel's time. So Daniel is the guy that works with me. He's been with me since basically the Python plays Grand Theft Auto stuff. And around that time, I just told him like, hey, like could we actually do it like truly from scratch? Because it would have to be from scratch. Because if it's not from scratch, and eventually we have to use something else, even including NumPy, like we'd really want to be able to do this without NumPy, and then we could use NumPy, but we'd want to do it like truly from scratch. That way, nothing is black box. And if we could do that, then it would be worth it, right? It would be worth trying to like look back into that. So, I don't like from that point, I think it was just kind of like the side project or something. And at some point, Daniel like came and showed me some of his notes, and they were like, just like code, just from the code and like slowly building out the code. It was, I want to say it was something like 200 pages of just like, no words almost. It was just code. And I was like, I think at that point it wasn't even actually done. Like I'm not sure how done like backprop was and stuff like that. But after I saw it in that forum, it was like, well, wait a second, like that could be a book. Like that's so obviously a book at that point. Because I figured once we added like text and explained everything, maybe we'd be at like 300-400 pages. And so then I was like, well, we could sell a book and then do videos, and then maybe that project would make sense, like fiscally and time wise, for us to really invest and do it right. And yeah, the rest is history from there. so obviously that definitely worked out pretty well. We've sold almost 10,000 copies. I'm not sure what the exact number is. That's more than 9,000 and somewhere around 10,000 at this point.
And for the audience listening in through the audio, I'm just sharing my screen, but you could head over to nnfs.io. That's where you could grab a copy. I just have my ebook right now because I wasn't sure if the customs would let a physical book in through. But yeah, you can grab a copy or just watch the videos on Sentdex channel as well. Though they have a nice overlap with the book.
You say you're in India?
Yes.
Yeah, we've shipped books to India. It definitely takes longer. I think we've had some that are like in customs for like a month or, something crazy. Not all of them take that long. It definitely seems like random, but I will say if your book doesn't show up, we send another one. So like, I wouldn't worry about that. Or if it shows up and it's in terrible shape, we'll send another one. So don't worry about that. for anybody who's watching or yourself included. So anyway, yeah.
Just to be clear, I was mentioning this because right now we're in a lockdown. So otherwise, Indian customs is Indian customs. I paid $1,000 in customs for my Titan GPU. It is what it is.
Oh man. Hey, at least you have a GPU, right? Right now, those are hard.
For sure. But again, coming back to all of these things, in one of your Q&A, you mentioned you were close to being broke while working on all of these businesses early in your career, but still you found fulfillment in just building all of these things by yourself, and your family, your wife was very supportive of you, even when you decided to sell your bike for 600 pounds of Lego. Was there was there ever a point where you were maybe scared or just contemplating that because you had offers from really great companies that this could be an alternate path because this may or may not work out? Was there ever a intimidation?
Yeah, well, first of all, the reason I laugh so hard at the Legos is I honestly will never forget, because our whole living room. So we were at an apartment that was maybe 700 square feet, and I don't know what that would be in square like meters, but anyway, not a big area, and 600 pounds of Lego takes up the entire living room, and I will never forget. I was like on the floor, like trying to organize some of the Lego because you could sell, like people would buy, like, so I knew, like when I did that trade, I knew that just by weight alone it was $10 per pound. So I knew, and the motorcycle was worth like $3,500. So I knew, like, if I sold everything in bulk, it would be $6,000. That would be a good deal. And but if you separated everything out and you put together the sets, it was going to be like $20,000 plus, but everything was in pieces and you had to put it all back together. And so at first I thought I would do that. And so I'm on the floor putting Lego together, as like a 20-year-old. And my girlfriend at the time, now wife, comes in and she's brought a friend with her. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the most embarrassing thing ever. Because I'm like in this room that is just Lego everywhere. Her friend asks 0 questions. So, there's just like massive judgment going on at that point. Like, I'm never going to forget that. I'm like, oh, this is embarrassing. I swear it's a good business idea. Anyway, yeah. Sorry,
are you still friends with them, or did they never speak with you afterwards?
Honestly, I don't even remember who that was. Like, I can't even remember who that was. Cause even, my wife, I think back then she was still possibly like a dance major at Sam Houston. And she later changed her degree to, I think it was biology. So she could do pre-med, and now she's a physician. And I don't know, I think that was one of her friends from dance or something. And I don't think I couldn't even tell you who it was. So we're definitely not friends, I don't think. but yeah. Sorry, I got distracted on that. What was your question?
My question was there ever self-doubts at that point
during the right. Yeah. So actually, timeline wise, I was actually doing pretty good when I was a waiter at this place called like Blue Cats. And it was pretty obvious. Like, I think one of the things that's nice being self-employed is you always know, like, what's the situation? Is this business going to exist a year from now, 5 years from now, and so on? Whereas like when you're employed, like I remember when I became self-employed, people would ask like, well, where's the job security in that? And it's like, well, I think it's actually pretty good if you're self-employed. Whereas if you're not, people are making decisions based on themselves and their needs only. They're not thinking about your job most of the time. So anyway, getting back to the question though, I was actually doing pretty well while I was still a waiter at this place, Blue Cats. And then I kind of felt like they're probably going out of business, but they would not, anytime the subject or the thought came up, they would shoot it down. But I was like, well, you're not serving enough people. Like, I can do math. There's no way this is working out. And so eventually I did. They just like, basically they didn't even tell us. this is like a perfect example. Like they just basically like I think it was a Saturday or Sunday before I was supposed to go into work. They just basically, I got a letter in the mail and they were like, hey, by the way, we're closed. Here's the rest of your check. Good luck, you know? And it's like, oh, great. And yeah, it was at that point where I was like, well, I'm making enough to survive, like without trying to go get another job. Like, why don't I just try this instead? Like, why don't I just try to keep making it on my own and see what happens? And so at that point, like, I don't know how much I was making, but it was something like when I would like file for taxes, like one year it was like $600 of income. And then the next year was like 6,000. And even like that year, I just remember like when I found out how much I had to pay in taxes, because when you're self-employed, they're not taking out like Social Security and Medicaid or Medicare, all that stuff. So you still have to pay that stuff, even if your tax rate is so low, or you can take deductions and so on. You still owe those things. And so like still at the end of the day, I still owed money. And like I had a hard time like coming up with that money. Like it was a very small dollar figure. And so that was really rough. And yeah, for like those first few years, it was definitely tough to like make enough money. But like at least I forget what my wife was doing at that time, but she was doing, I don't know, she was working at like a clinic or something like that at that time. And so at least she had income, and like she was really supportive of me just like trying to invest my time at least into this like online business to see where I can go from in like, can I make anything here? And so like at that time, I mean, she was paying most of the bills, getting the groceries, that kind of stuff. And so, so I could focus like completely on trying to make this work out. But yeah, if it wasn't for her, I'd probably would have had to be like living at home or something like that. And I'm very thankful that wasn't the case. So, so yeah, that was probably for like 3-4 years. There is really no way I could have like made a living. And I think at least nowadays, I think it's easier to make money online. Like back then, there was really no such thing as like sponsors. Like people didn't sponsor a YouTuber. Like that was insane. Whereas nowadays, you can get a sponsor and only, you know, you could be doing like 1,000 views or you know, somewhere between 1 and 10. Or like in general, now they're trying to look at like what are your like monthly view numbers or something like that to get an idea, or a per video or something like that. But it used to be the case that you had to do like millions of views if you wanted to get any sponsor. Whereas nowadays, it's just not like that anymore. And so at least that the barrier to entry to like making money, or like merch, like selling merch, or like all those kinds of stuff, or like affiliate product, like there's so many ways to make money now. Whereas back then it really was just YouTube ads. Like there was really no other way to make money. And so like, but around that time I was also doing like, I would buy and sell domain names. So I was just doing everything I could to try to continue to build. But at least especially like with YouTube, I think you can't get negative views. I mean, you can, there's ways, but you really can't. And so as long as you're like putting out content, you will get views. You might not get as many as you hoped, but you're going to get views. And if you put out, I think the term for it now is like evergreen content, but it's just, if you put out content that it's not like news or like vloggy type stuff, you'll continue to get views over time on those videos. So it's like, they never go away. So you just keep building up this base and the views will just keep going up. But I will say nowadays, things are changing so fast with like YouTube. Like the algorithm on YouTube changes its mind a lot. And like that algorithm will murder you. Like one day it's your friend and the next day it's not your friend. And
was it ever in your mind to optimize for that? I know many people just talk about that. I'm sure you didn't have as much thought about it, but were you ever trying to chase that and just get out to more audience?
No, because I think at least back then, and I think it's still now the case. Like I think it's a little less. I would almost say less the case now. But I always felt like Google and YouTube's goal is to find the best content. They don't want to find the best SEO approach. So at any given time, you might have the best SEO approach and you'll get a nice bump. But it's like constantly changing. And so if you have somebody who like continuously is on top of it and like knows what they're really doing, I've sure I've always kind of, no offense to anybody who does SEO for a living, but like I never respond to anybody who's SEO related because I'm just like, no. Like I think if you want to get views, just make really good content. Put all of your focus on making really good content, and I think that's your best chance. Like if you're worried about SEO or you're worried about all those kind of like little things, like people are going to try to find, like people will find and remember you based on your content, and then the search engines, they're trying to optimize for helping people to find the best content. So I mean, they're working for you for the most part. And so, yeah, I've never really tried. I try to put relevant titles, I try to make it decent in that regard, but even like things like thumbnails, I'm really bad at just adding thumbnails, and I try to make them, and I'll go through phases where I make, because like thumbnails make sense to me. It's like packaging, right? It's not really for the algorithm. It's for the person like looking through videos. If they can read the thumbnail really quickly or get an understanding what the video is, I think those have a lot of value. But again, at the end of the day, I think make good quality content and the rest will probably follow. Doesn't mean it will for sure, but I think that's your best bet.
That's such an amazing advice. And one of the things I discovered, and just for context, you were just talking about all of these things as from a content creator perspective, and that's what's so beautiful about your journey, because early in the day it wasn't clear at all that hey, this could be a job at all. Now people know that if you have even 10,000 subscribers, you could be using that as side income, but you were always focused on fulfillment. And I think at some point you mentioned that if you were to divide the number of hours that you put into this, it'll be below minimum wage. So talk about fulfillment. What's that thought process like for you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, probably nowadays, if you added up all the hours total, I might still be close to minimum wage, but I'm probably better than minimum wage now. But definitely for like the first, like I said, the first like 4 years was probably like $3 an hour or less. Like it was very bad.
And
Then
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just for the audience's reference, at that point you were getting all of these offers from really exciting companies for like from different perspectives, and yet you were making a decision to stick to what you were doing.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think that would be a terrible time to cash out, right? You've put in all this time and energy, and then that's when you decide to check out, when it like just started to possibly pan out really well for you. I think that would be a huge mistake. But I also, yeah, I think it depends what you're doing. Like I'm not necessarily negative at going to work for some company, but it, like with the YouTube channel, it is like there's very few things that I could think of that are like as fulfilling or just as fun and interesting. Like every day I wake up and I just do whatever I want to do. Like what that's like that sounds like retirement to me. And so like why not do that for as long as you can, right? Like I'm living my retirement now. At some point YouTube has to stop. Like I'm sure things will not always be going great on YouTube, or maybe a new platform comes out. YouTube's kind of an old platform in terms of like social media platforms. So who knows how long YouTube even has? Or maybe they're here for the next 50 years. We don't really know, but I'm sure at some point things will change. But at least for now, it's very rewarding. And like, what else could I, like, if I was going to work for, like say Facebook or something, what am I really doing? Like I might be writing really cool code, maybe building some sort of cool product, but it's just not like, it's not the same to me as like, I don't know, like I feel like it's just really cool when like you hear that, like when I meet people and they're like, hey, I got started on your stuff, and like, or I got a job from like doing your, basically like just your content, like that's really cool. And the fact that I can do that, I can offer it for free. There's just ads. And then like now I plug the book as much as I can. But anybody can access it for completely free. I think that's like, that's just really cool. I mean, like everybody's winning in this scenario. And so, yeah, I want to keep doing that for as long as I can. There's other stuff, like there's definitely stuff that could lure me away. But I don't know that I would ever like completely stop YouTube unless I just, for some reason, YouTube stops working out for me.
How have you stayed so humble throughout your journey? You might disagree, but you're one of the best teachers in the world. How didn't you let your ego overpower you, if I may?
I don't know how to answer that question. I just know, like, for sure, I think it's one of those things where like when I first started like writing code and stuff like that and like teaching online, like I was wrong a lot. And so like people would tell me like, hey, no, this is the way things are, or like this is how you could do that better. Like there was always like new stuff to learn. And then even now, that's kind of how I feel. Like I feel like even the more I've like learned programming and gotten into certain things, the more I've like realized how little I actually know about a lot of stuff. Like I'm not that good at a lot of things, and just programming and Python related. So I don't know. I almost think like the more you do it, the more you realize that you don't know, and that like I think that's just humbling in it by itself. You just kind of realize that you're not actually that good. So I don't know. I think that's why I'm humbled by like, especially like Python and programming, just this little niche topic. There's so much, or even if you just take it even further to like machine learning, like there's so much going on. And, I might know a lot about how to make this model or that model work or whatever, but there's there's so much. Like I feel like I know like 2% of machine learning or something like that. Like just there's so much going on, and there's just, like I said, so little that I actually know. That I think that's probably why I'm just aware that there's people who know stuff that I don't know.
And it's you sure do enjoy it a lot. It does definitely come through your videos. You can't fake all of that enthusiasm, if I may. It at least through all of these videos, it comes through a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. I think, especially for me, it's like computers and programming in general, like we didn't have a family computer until I was maybe 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. Like when I was a young kid, there was no such thing as like tablets or computers or anything. And then when we first got started, like we were on dial up just like everybody else. And like, so like being a part of that as like kind of computers came into fruition, I still remember a time where they did not exist, or they didn't exist like they do today. And like programming to me is just like so mind blowing that like when I first started to learn it for myself, like I just fell in love with it because it was like, man, you just spend a little bit of time, you can do this thing, you can build this thing. And it's a multiplier of productivity by like, I don't even know, like for sure 100x, but there's things you could do to make it even more than that. And I just think that's like even like the book, for example, like we're selling books, but I'm not doing anything to like, I'm not a part of that process. It's all automated. And so it's like, and like we like arguably Daniel wrote most of those systems, and but somebody wrote those to happen. It didn't already exist, but via programming that all those things now take place. And I think that like that is, there's something really cool about that can be done. And then the same thing with like machine learning. Like I remember the first time I used scikit-learn, and I don't know what model I used, probably a support vector machine to do something. And I was just like, whoa, that is so cool that you can like, that it can do this. And like, especially at that time, it was almost cooler before I knew how it worked. Same thing with like K nearest neighbors, like, wow, that's so cool until you find out how it works. And you're like, oh yeah, that like, I remember I did like a pattern recognition with finance series. And then like later after I learned K nearest neighbors, I was like, hey, wait a second. I basically built some K nearest neighbors. I didn't know that was K nearest neighbors, but it's like, it's so obvious that I thought of it just randomly that I feel like now it's like, oh, that's not really that cool. But I almost think it's cool because it's so basic, and like arguably even like neural networks are they're the complex part is like the calculus part, I suppose. But even those like neural networks are not actually that fancy. And the things that you can do with them, that we haven't even fully grasped. I just, there's that, and that's what I mean. Like, that's why, like, I keep doing this, is because it's like, man, it really is. It's so exciting to be playing with these like new models and just like trying these new things that have just come out. Um, and yeah, there's just something super alluring to that kind of stuff, like with computers and programming, and then now like machine learning. I don't know. I feel like it's almost like you're on the cusp of, it's like you're on the cusp of like when computers first came out or something like that. Like that's what it feels like when you're like doing machine learning stuff, because I feel like there's probably, I don't know how many total people are doing machine learning in the world, but how many people get to play with GPT 1 week and then they're doing like text to speech in another week, or, like all these things. Like, that's not that many people. Like this is a cool job. That's for sure. It's super rewarding, super interesting. And then I get to share it with people, and like, that's cool too. So yeah, it's a cool space to be in for sure.
I was so excited when I saw your tweet that I think you've trained a GPT model with Python code, and now you're trying code to comment or similar models. I'm sure the video will come out soon, but that was very exciting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I've been basically training that. We've done two things since we did the initial. So when I got, it's there with the little DGX station back there. Since I've had that, let's see, we tinkered with some of the Jarvis stuff, which was also really cool. I'm that's what I mean. Like, I feel like this is all I do. All I do every day is like learn about machine learning stuff. I mean, I do other stuff. I do eat, I sleep and stuff like that. But
I don't believe that.
I'm a big sleeper. I'm like a 8 hours a night guy. If I can survive on like 6, but if I do like 6 2 days in a row, I'm severely degraded. And if I get like 5 hours of sleep a night, I'm done. Like I'm going to be no use the next day. And then like I remember when I was in like high school and stuff, when people would do like all-nighters, and but I can't do it. I'll blink and I'll fall asleep. I just boom, I'm out. And I just no. I'm definitely a sleeper. Anyway, yeah, like I spent all my time, at least working time, like learning all these like new things and trying these new models. And but like while I'm doing that, there's people who are focusing completely on doing stuff like GPT research, or like I really want to do like the talking head videos. My dream would be and I'm slowly recording a bunch of samples of my voice. Basically, I want to have the what's the name of that? Do you know much about speech to text?
I do.
There's that data set, the something speech. I don't know. LJ speech, that data set. I want to say it's either 12 or 24 hours of audio. I'm trying to like build an LJ speech sized data set on just my voice. And then I want to do,
that's so cool.
I'm doing I want to get a talking head. And then essentially I would like to text to Sentdex, like a tutorial. And the best thing would be like doing the tutorial for the talking head. So hopefully one day that will happen. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, it's like there's so much stuff like that that's going on. And then coming back to like the Jarvis thing, like I take a step out, I come back, and like now with all these like speed ups and stuff like that, now basically it's unbelievably simple for me to just like talk into the microphone and get an instant response back to me from a chatbot, a GPT chatbot nonetheless. And it's like, man, it's like there's just so much stuff happening. It's just such a cool field. I don't remember what your question was.
It was just about all of this exciting stuff that's happening. But also going back to the early days, I remember I would freak the F out if that were to happen to me. But I remember your self-driving car videos and things wouldn't work because you'd run out of memory, and you were already running the game on such a small resolution, and the taskbar would be flying, and you were really enjoying it. And it's really fascinating to think just in 4 or 5 years how far we've come ahead of that. The speed are just insane.
Yeah, I look back at that video, and we got a couple of interesting things coming out very soon. So we have one thing. It's one thing. It is Grand Theft Auto related. It's not self-driving cars though, but it's I think almost cooler. Grand Theft. It's based with Grand Theft Auto 5.
I know. I was asking, is
Possibly.
it an aimbot or something like that?
Oh, actually, well, since you said the video comes out in like 2 weeks,
It does,
this
yes.
video. Okay, so what we're doing is I did put out a couple of tweets of using GameGAN. I don't know if you
Mm,
came across those GameGAN tweets.
I did.
So yeah, so we did some tinkering with GameGAN on like a kind of a, well, we started with Cartpole. Cartpole didn't work out. We have some ideas and theories as to why Cartpole didn't work. I mean, it sort of worked. It worked to the point where we knew the model was learning, but it just wasn't learning. But anyway, so that didn't work out well. Then we did a little race car game, and I posted a couple of videos from that, and we actually improved quite a bit from there. And then it was around that time that NVIDIA brought up the DGX station, and one of the kind of tough things of GameGAN is it is a memory hog. And so we were like, oh, we could do something really cool with having that much memory. And so GameGAN is what we decided to do. And then we decided to use Grand Theft Auto 5 as the game that we were going to try to mimic. And so so that's coming out soonish. Like, I'm still editing that video, but probably by the time this is posted, it'll be done. And it works like pretty well. Like, it's very low resolution. So then one of the other things was Daniel wrote a super sampler. So it's super sampled up 8x. The super sampler is actually really good. The problem is GameGAN, it produces a lot of like artifacts and stuff. And we were still trying, like, we're still learning a lot about, like, neither of us came to GameGAN with, I don't know about Daniel, but I didn't have any GAN experience. I'm pretty confident neither did Daniel. So we're still just like learning about how this stuff works. But well, we learned a lot for sure doing Grand Theft Auto 5. But the big takeaway is it works. Like, you can drive around, like we did it with the armored Kuruma car, and just like picked like a stretch of highway. We got rid of all other traffic and all that kind of stuff, and just trying to see, like, could we just like drive around, and would it work at all? And so we first just tried that, and you like our initial results were 100% clear it works, and we were like, oh my gosh, like, this is so crazy. Like, we just could not believe that that you could do it. And so then there was like little stuff, like when you turn the car, the horizon will roll, and like it does in the game, so it mimics that. And then, like, one of the other things that was picked up really early was like if the car is in a certain orientation, it gets the sunlight reflection on the back window, and then it also like spreads to, because the car is like this like matte black finish, so it's like a real solid reflection, but then like a nice soft reflection, and it moves like as the car is turning on the road. And then the car has a shadow, and the shadow works correctly. I'm trying to think of what else. And then just driving around. I mean, it just drives around on the road, and like seeing all those things being like modeled. And like the crazy part to me is that it's modeling physics. It's modeling Grand Theft Auto's physics. But then immediately my question is, like, could we model something in real life? Could we model a real life physics problem? And would it work? Because it probably would. If it's picking up like physics interactions in a game, my expectation is that it could pick up very complex physics relationships in real life, likely better than like a rule-based model would. Then this is like one of the main problems with like video games, is physics always kind of sucks. So so moving forward, I think that's kind of one of the things that I'd like to do with GameGAN. We're going to have to change the name to something other than GameGAN. And in this project, the name is GAN Theft Auto.
Wow.
So yeah, it's the best. It's a perfect name. So yeah, I joked. I was like, yeah, whenever I came up with that name, I was like, this project has to work because it has the best name. But yeah, something like MGAN or something like that. And at least for now, I'll hear your feedback if what you think. So my thought is to get like a maze, like a little 3D printed maze with like a marble, and then like get some servos or something, and then you would use your keyboard to like tilt the maze, and that would be like, you would collect data. You could write a bot that would do that, and that's what we did with GAN Theft Auto. And by we, I mean Daniel. did all that Grand Theft Auto stuff. So like he like it's going to be covered in the video, but like that man has full control over Grand Theft Auto at this point. Like he can do literally anything in that game. Like when we were doing Grand Theft Auto, he was we had like obviously you don't want to hand do it to make all the data. So we wanted to use a bot to drive around. Plus we only had the DGX. Probably by the time this video goes up, we won't have it anymore. So we knew there was a limited time with the station. So we needed to collect data fast. So it's like one Grand Theft Auto instance, but there's like 8 to 12 bots in that instance on the same stretch of road. They're just invisible to each other and they like clip through each other. So it's crazy. So, but based on all that R&D that was made to do Grand Theft Auto, we're 100% taking that back to the initial self-driving car in Grand Theft Auto, because now we can make huge training data sets really, really quickly. And hopefully Rockstar's attitude towards that kind of stuff was hopefully faded. Like when we were doing the self-driving car in Grand Theft Auto, I was just like waiting for the day for them to be like, you gotta stop. Because they were like, for some reason, they were like real anti people like doing that kind of stuff in their game. I still think today, like we could never release the software for like doing this, but hopefully we can release at least the training data, I would hope. So, but for sure we will revisit that project, because now we could build these training data sets so fast, and they could be doing anything. Like you could have one that's like a motorcycle, because like that was kind of with the self-driving car in Grand Theft Auto. I always wanted to have like, at least when I played, I always like got on the motorcycle and I would go contra flow traffic and like weave in and out, try to see, can I do like one lap around Grand Theft Auto 5? And like, I'd like to make a bot that could like do that and like learn to do that really well. And then you could have one that drives like a sane person would drive, and you could just have so many different models. And then that brings us back to like with the Twitch chat, being able to like kind of control how does it behave and stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to revisit that project. But yeah, when I look back to the original self-driving car in Grand Theft Auto and like watch like the decisions that I made and like how I was able to succeed with that, I'm like, this guy's an idiot. Like, how does this work? I cannot believe that it worked out. I look back at that. I'm like, man, you don't know what the heck you're doing. And it's just so funny because yeah, somehow that worked. And even now, I just cannot, even back then, I think people were surprised that you could do like a single frame at a time with a ConvNet to pick a direction. And even now I look back at that and I'm like, man, I cannot believe that actually worked. And then the only thing that I'm still impressed with myself to this day of was it would eventually always get biased to like some direction change. But because the training data was a perfectly balanced training data set. One of the ideas I had was, what if we tweaked so you get your output prediction, your output layer, right? Those values. What if we added one more weight layer, but we set that weight layer and then it's not a trainable layer. But when you get those outputs, you could weight them such that after you went through your entire, test set, because the test set should be a perfectly balanced set, can we find the set of weights that we could multiply that output layer by to enforce that we get a perfect balance of outputs? So it's not intelligent in any way. All it's doing is just trying to balance the numbers. That's it. And that actually made a huge difference on the car's driving performance. Like it actually worked really well. And still to this day, I think if we did it again, if we have imbalanced outputs, that's exactly what I would propose that we do to fix it again. So that was cool. But the rest of that project, I just can't believe it even worked. I mean, it's just crazy.
I got a nice peek into the, if I may, Sentdex R&D labs. But what goes on behind the scenes, the things that don't make it to YouTube? I think you're also running a training loop right now. I can see the tensor board, I think, screen on the DGX box output. But just curious how much of a difference that has made for you. And we as an audience know a lot of exciting stuff has come out of it. But how's the R&D for you look like right now?
You mean with that in particular, or what do you mean?
just in general, with the DGX box, how much was that helpful? And also, what goes on behind the scenes, the things that we don't get to see?
Yeah, I think most stuff, well, I don't know. Maybe half the stuff comes to fruition. I'm not sure. There's a lot of stuff that like it just doesn't work, or like one of the struggles that we've had is like some of the stuff, especially once like a perfect example like of like I don't think I'm an expert programmer, but I think Daniel's an expert programmer, and he comes up with certain things that I'm like, well, we could never do a tutorial on that. Like we can't, that can't go to video. And so there's like certain things where I'm like, man, we can't really share that. So like with GAN Theft Auto, for example, it can't be a tutorial on how to do GAN Theft Auto. Like we're going to release the code, the models, the training data, like everything you need to like do what we did, you will have access to. But in terms of like us breaking down and teaching you how GAN Theft Auto works, it's like, oh man, I don't think we can do that. Like that's just like too much. And like that's almost like, at least for me, it's kind of almost a drag sometimes if you have to like we've made all this progress, we've done some really cool stuff, I'd like to continue pushing the limit on GAN Theft Auto, and I know Daniel would too. And like do we want to go backwards and like write up all the stuff like we've been on GAN Theft Auto for like 2 months? No, I don't really want to do that. So that's sometimes hard. And so like there's sometimes stuff that comes out, or like with the chat bot that's on Twitter, for example, some people have requested to see a video on that. I'm like, well, maybe not, because like I know the code is terrible, but and two, and it's not the way that I don't think you should write a chat bot the way that I wrote the chat bot for Twitter. But also it's like now I've moved on, or I wouldn't mind maybe rewriting that chatbot. And sometimes that happens. Like there's times where I've thought I want to redo something, so then I'll redo it and then plan to do a video on it or something. But yeah, for sure, there's a lot of stuff that goes into R&D, or it just doesn't work. Like there's stuff that in the past like hasn't actually worked, and I just don't share it because it wasn't successful or it wouldn't be interesting in any way. So it was just like a test. But in terms of, yeah, like with GAN Theft Auto and like having the proper GPUs, like, so yeah, with let's see, with Python, or yeah, with the Python Plays GTA, I want to say that series began with a 980 and then ended on a 1080 Ti. And even then it was tight. It was tough to like fit everything on there, especially like the kind of the last things that I was working on was the adding the TensorFlow object detection API on top of the self-driving stuff that was going on. And then the thought there was that, you could almost use that as a fail-safe. So like if it detected the distance of the car in front, you could still like not, because sometimes for whatever reason that ConvNet like it just would not detect a car, and it would just try to drive straight on through them. Especially like the white, I think it was white cars. I think it just thought it was more pavement or something.
And you had to take over at times just to make sure it's not messing up as much.
Well, definitely with I think, well, with the stream, I mean, when we did like the model that ran for a long, like if I was recording a video, I would definitely take over it sometimes and like fix it. But like the stream ran 24/7, and I assure you, I like I said, I sleep. So it was definitely all by itself. But yeah, it was not, I mean, obviously it was not the best of drivers, but it was on the right track most of the time. But anyway, yeah, we well, some of the time. Anyway, yeah, fitting all that on the 1080 Ti was tough. And then I think at some point I got a second 1080 Ti. So then the driving model was on one of them and the object detection was on another. And that was almost comfortable. But I think, especially if we go back today, I mean, we won't be on 1080 Ti's anymore. And so it'll be nice. So I have at least the DGX, unfortunately, I don't think will be here for that project, but I've got a couple RTX Titans now, and then the box machine that has a couple RTX 8000s. So we have plenty of headroom to do quite a bit comfortably, I think, on there. And I think our plan is to just live train too. Like we could collect data at such a rate that we could train that model live and stream the model driving live, and then that model could be updated in real time. So I think that would also be really cool to kind of see the model's progress over time at becoming hopefully a much better driver than even the one that I had back in the day, because all that data was collected manually and it was just painful. Whereas now we don't have to do it that way. So, and we can collect it so much faster and train it much faster that, yeah, I look forward to that. But definitely, yeah, since for the game GAN stuff, like I think one of the things that people don't recognize with this was true in the self-driving car and Grand Theft Auto days, like people wanted to see it progress faster than it was. And I was just like, guys, like this is just a fun project. And like we're not Tesla, we're not any of these companies that are like people are pouring billions of dollars into self-driving cars and we're still not there yet. I mean, they're better than arguably Charles was in Grand Theft Auto, but this is a very hard problem. And the same thing is true with Grand Theft Auto, for example. You'll see the final model, but we trained like 30 different models, trying this, try that, try this little change here. And each time you change something, it's going to take you hours or days to find the results. And that's hours or days on the DGX station back there. Like if you don't have that, it's going to take you like a week per model. So, I mean, you're already looking at half of a year or more just to do like R&D for a fun Grand Theft Auto project. So yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of R&D that goes on in the background that the viewer is just not privy to. They just don't understand. Like, it's not like we come at these projects and we know how to do it, but at the same, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like tutorialitis where, and part of the reason why I like to leave in mistakes is I think people think that like I know everything or whoever's teaching tutorials, or that like, I think a lot of times people get the feeling that like they are stupid or inferior to the people that they see teaching tutorials because these people never make mistakes. Well, they never make mistakes because they edit out the mistakes. Like that's the difference. That's all it is. Or they edit out the part where they're like, wait, what do I do there? And then they go to Stack Overflow and they look it up, right? Or whatever they're using to look up their answers. So I think that it kind of goes two ways, right? There's a lot of stuff that gets missed. And then I also think to some extent it makes you look smarter than you are because they're not seeing all the times and all the stupid models and all the dumb things that you tried first that just didn't work out, right? So yeah, hopefully that answers your question on R&D. But I will say for sure, having something like that back there, or just having like the right GPU power, it makes like such a huge difference. And like whenever I got the box machine with the two RTX 8000s, there's times where that machine sits idle. And like I've reached out and asked people like, hey, if anybody has model or something that they want to see trained, contact me, because there's times where it's idle. I will run it. I'll run it for free. I'll pay the electricity. And I don't get like, nobody is like, I mean, okay, some people reach out, but it's like stupid stuff, right? It's like just stuff that I'm not going to do.
My homework like, for me, please, Harrison.
That's basically it. Yeah. And so, no, I don't want to do that. Or I've had some stuff. There have been, I'm not calling anybody out, but there have been people who have sent me purely like a Kaggle challenge, but basically all they're trying to do is, do better at Kaggle because they want more power rather than try to do something interesting. Like there's certain Kaggle things that are interesting. So I'm not saying everyone who's reached out about Kaggle, I'm not insulting you. It's just, there's certain people who have reached out, and like, that's another example where they're just trying to win the competition. It's not actually like a cool thing. So, yeah, I'm kind of surprised that I haven't really seen much in the way of interest in accessing that power, because that would have been something I think for me, I would have been really interested in whenever I was first getting started, because it was like always a struggle to get enough space and headroom. And even with like Grand Theft Auto, it was hard to get enough headroom to really train a model. And then if you wanted to run like 3 or 4 at the same time and speed it up, like you couldn't, so just having that compute power makes a huge difference. And I don't know much about Collab. I've seen like the NVIDIA SMI of Collab, and I've seen that like they have like 16 gigs of memory. I guess it's a V100, but surely it's not actually 16 gigs of memory. Like, I don't know how much you know about collab and like, is it shared or like how long do you get that access? Like, how's that working? Like,
I think it's 12 or 24 hours. But the thing about me is I'm very spoiled. I have two 3090s and one A6000. The A6000 NVIDIA sent me. So I never log into my collab account, even though I have a pro subscription. But I really enjoy having that hardware locally. It makes some difference for me. I'm, of course, very biased and very fortunate to be in this position. But yeah, somewhat it's somewhat annoying for me that overhead of connecting Google Drive just for it and then figuring out how to restart it, because I'm also trying to experiment with GANs, and it just takes too long to train all of them, and I don't want to figure out how to do that on Colab.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, there have been services over time, over like the history that I've used that are like cloud based, and I think they're pretty easy to use, but for the most part you always run it, like something goes wrong. And like the first one I ever used, and again, I'm not trash talking any of these like services, but especially like the value added services. So the one that I used initially was I think, I'm sure they still exist. It's a company called like Python Anywhere. And I used them because, again, I was just like a complete novice. I didn't if you asked me what was Ubuntu, I couldn't have even told you. So I didn't understand how to do these things on my own, but I knew I wanted to run scripts like somewhere else besides locally, because if there's a power outage or all these other things, like I wanted it to be a little more reliable. And so I used that website. But then as I got better, I like outgrew the website to some extent, but then it was like a huge pain to like get off, you know? And it's more expensive than if you either just buy like a regular old server or if you have the hardware local. But for sure, at least as far as I know, right, like the last time I looked, the cost to like own hardware local versus use it in the cloud, it's very quickly, I want to say it's like 2 months or less. I can't remember for sure, but I think it's 2 months. If you if you're running stuff for cumulatively 2 months, you could have bought the hardware and run it until that hardware is dead. Right? And you would have, it would be the same cost. So obviously that's ignoring like, oh no, I think when I did one video on like cloud versus local. I think I did actually include I can't remember if I included electric cost or not, but even like the DGX station behind me, I've been running that basically 24/7, and it is, I want to say it's costing me like $100 to maybe $150 a month, which is pretty negligible for the power that it provides. Right. So, you know, so I know that people are going to say like electric, and then I think you have to sort of factor in, you've got electric, and then as you're drawing power is heat. So, or its energy is heat, and you've got to air condition that. So, but still the number is 150 for like all of that. Like my energy bill went up 150. so I know that's the number. So, yeah, so almost would say that's negligible, especially on something like that, where if you're renting it, I think they're renting them for like $9,000 a month or something. So the 150 is, it's not really that much. And having the convenience, especially like, yeah, that thing's got, I want to say it's like 10G. So like just to transfer information back and forth and like the proper size data sets that you would be having on a machine like that, it's pretty nice to like have it local. And again, not everybody needs that, but yeah, having like a 1080 Ti or better local, I think is definitely something you want if you can get it. But I understand not everybody is fortunate enough to have that. And that's why I put out the box. I'm like, hey, I got this thing. And like, we can fit pretty much anything you want on the box, because that together is 96 gigs of VRAM. We can do anything you want. I mean, even GameGAN kind of fits on the box. It's tough, but it can be done. And if I ever get around to doing that MGAN with, I never got your opinion, I don't think, on the having like the marble and stuff, but that's kind of what I want to do with MGAN. Most likely that will wind up being done on the box. But you know,
I was just fascinated by it. I didn't have anything to say. I was just fascinated by it. Just a thought experiment of it.
Yeah. Can you think of anything else that would be like maybe simpler, or like, have you checked out GameGAN at all? Like, are you familiar with that project or?
I saw your video and I read the paper enough so that I could probably bring that topic up in this interview. But beyond that, I didn't play around with it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let me know if you think of anything else that you think would be, because my fear is just the complexity of the environment, really. But like,
I was trying to think if you could, using your model from the GTA 5, just use that as trading data of some sort for the game gun. I'm not sure if this makes sense at all.
well, that's what we would use for the obviously for like GAN Theft Auto. That's what we've done. But like, what I would like to do is like model I would want to model something in real life. So I would record it with a real camera, a stationary camera, probably top down. Because then my end goal here would be to do that, train the model, and then later you could be side by side with so you'd have your keyboard, and then you would literally press the turn tilt keys, and then you would just compare reality to the simulated and just see like, are they the same? Did we actually simulate physics correctly, as the marble navigates this maze and hopefully, bounces sometimes, when it hits the wall and all these like little things. Cause like that was just, at least for me, like really shocking and I don't think it's really game GAN necessarily. So we probably, with game GAN, there's certain aspects to game GAN that we couldn't really figure out. So there's like static and dynamic memory. And then there's like the concepts where like you should be able to, like, at least for them, like leave a room and come back. And I guess they did that with, I think it was Doom, or was it Doom?
I think so.
I think it was Doom. I don't think we saw anything like that. Like so we tried adding, like towards the end, we tried adding other cars. So we added some like police cars and stuff, and like those were very hard to get to show up. And if you like saw one, you turn around again, is gone. It won't be there. And so we couldn't figure that one out. And then I'm trying to think of what else I don't know, but the wall, but for example, one of the things that we did end up adding to training was walls. So you can run the car into a wall, and if you run it like straight perpendicular into the wall, it even like, as I was like recording the video, I never noticed this, but like when you hit the wall, the car will like lurch forward, and like your view will lurch forward. And I thought that was really cool, but it'll hit the wall and stay there. But if you hit the wall at like a diagonal, it'll actually force the car to turn and drag along the wall. So yeah, it was just really surprising to me when we saw like those kinds of like physics. Cause I think all Game GAN did was Pac-Man, Doom. I can't remember if they did anything else, but, I don't think they did anything like Grand Theft Auto with like physics. But I know that there are like other GAN based game mimicking things. And arguably, you probably could have done all the same things we did with just like, it didn't have to be game GAN necessarily. I don't really know. But certain things like that game GAN does really well, or did really well, was that like that aspect where you could like leave a room and come back and it would hopefully be in the same state. So yeah, I don't know. There's definitely a lot of interesting things there for sure. And I'm curious to see like, can you model either with game GAN or just GANs in general? Can you model like real physics, or to some degree physics, I guess.
I'm just sitting here fascinated by all of these ideas. I'm just trying to consume or just like process all of the things you're saying, because it somewhat makes sense that this would work, but just still absorbing the fact that all of this is actually somewhat working is really exciting to me, at least.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting to me too. I mean, I think we were definitely both surprised that like how quickly it worked in the Grand Theft Auto environment. I mean, it was pretty surprising. It was like immediately we were like, oh wow, that worked really well. Like it worked better. I would argue that our initial results with like Grand Theft Auto 5 worked better than our initial results with like the little Vroom game, the little 2D race car game. And that was just really surprising. Like you would not have expected that it would work that well, that quickly, but it did. And like, yeah, we were like, one of the other things that we didn't even get to find what was like the limit was like the roam range. So we just kind of like picked a slice of the highway, and all the training data is on this slice of highway, and it 100% works on that slice of highway. And then we wanted to add collision into the wall and other cars. That didn't really work very well. The walls works well, but the cars doesn't work. But and then we basically ran out of time. So one of the things I'd really like to test next is, can we increase the roam range? So one of the other like little details that I noticed that was being picked up is like, as you travel along the highway, you have like the mountains in the background, and the mountains actually slowly get closer to you. And so again, that was like really shocking to me that like, wow. So like in theory, you really could, like we could for sure extend the range. How far can we extend that range and have the model really remember all of these things? I don't know. But man, I really would like to find out, like how big, and then like, what would we need to do to get it to remember even more of this environment? Like how big of a neural network would be required to memorize like a mile of highway, for example? Like, yeah, I don't know, but yeah, it's definitely, it's cool. I mean, I think like whenever I first read that GameGAN paper, I was like, wow, that's really fascinating that you could like play a character inside of a neural network's environment. Like that's such a kind of backwards way that we're so used to AI in general. It's like the AI plays in our environments, but you're in an AI's environment. And then you kind of, especially like when you've made these environments, like when people showed demos, they didn't show the messy parts, I'm sure, that they saw. And like sometimes it's kind of interesting when the GAN gets a little confused and it gets fuzzy. It's almost a challenge to like help it back on the track or find its way. And like I remember with the Vroom game, one of the fun things was like trying to sometimes the road would just disappear. And so especially if you like went off road and then tried to come back, sometimes the road just didn't come back, but then there'd be like little speckles of the road. So then you'd be like trying to steer towards it and like get the GAN to like produce more road, like, because it would see the road and hopefully figure out that, oh my gosh, we're missing all this road, and then add the road back. So it was almost like a game in itself to like get it back. And I could foresee people like trying to confuse GANs while they're playing just to have fun, And but I also think like how it like after seeing like the Pac-Man thing and now playing GAN Theft Auto, like how is that not going to be the future? Like I see that, wow, that actually works. And that's probably going to eventually, like it doesn't yet, it's definitely worse than Grand Theft Auto and all the hard-coded rules. But
if you remember the days of GTA 3, it just sounds like that because, if you travel in one direction, if you turn around, the city has disappeared. Now you need to go back and all of that is being rendered.
That's happening today, right now in Cyberpunk 2077. So it's basically,
let's not talk about that game.
Hey, I think that's a great game. I think that's like, it's still that is still like it's the best game of 2020 in my opinion, and it's like the best game in the last 5 years. It's just not the game that was promised. But if you just can forget all the promises and just enjoy the beauty that is that game, then it's okay. But yeah, I would like to see something a little better in that game eventually. But
I pre-ordered it 5 years ago, I think 4 or 5 years ago. So that's why I'm disappointed.
Yeah. It sounds like you're like Daniel then, because yeah, he had pre-ordered the game. I don't think he's even played it yet. So he was like wanting to wait for the bugs to be fixed. And I'm like, that's not happening. There's just so many. But yeah, it's like if you have like especially like I played that, and then later I went back to Red Dead Redemption 2, and I was like, ugh, like, there's no ray tracing in here. Like this is disgusting. Like it's so crazy, like how quickly your standards change. Like that game, the Red Dead Redemption 2 game, is like, it's an unbelievably beautiful game, but yeah, you're like in a house and you see that like the light is not working and you're like, oh, that's terrible. I hate that. It's like immersion breaking now, whereas it really wasn't not all that long ago. But now that I know that, whoa, ray tracing exists, it's like, oh man, that's like kind of ruined everything else for me. But yeah, I look at like GAN Theft Auto or GameGAN, and I just like, I wonder, like, how is that not the future? Like it might not be GameGAN. It might not even be a GAN, but probably is some sort of generative model. How is that not going to be the future of games, but also like software, just like all kinds of things. I mean, it's like, it's really crazy. And that's what really excites me about just game GAN in general. And GANs are cool, but again, I'm not necessarily putting my hat in the ring and saying, hey, GANs are going to be the future. But it's kind of our first glimpse into, hey, you can actually interact with these models, or these models can provide a service to you more than just carrying around your boxes, or more than just driving you around in your car. It can be more than that. It can make the games for you. It can make your programs. It could be your operating system. It could be so many things that I just think it's like I said earlier, I feel like we're like on the cusp of just obviously machine learning for sure is clearly a new thing. Now it feels like it's been around for a long time, but again, I look at stuff like this, I'm like, no, this is definitely like early days of the future for sure. So yeah, I think that's definitely some cool stuff. Same thing with like the GPT stuff. I think the GPT stuff is less cool because that's like in the hands of very, very, very few people. Like almost nobody can do GPT, for sure GPT-3.
Yeah.
So I worry a little bit about those kinds of things, especially when it wasn't that long ago that like everybody recognized that there was no like benefit to making bigger and bigger and bigger models. Like there was a nice period in time where like basically everybody got to play on the same playing field with machine learning. And then GPT happened. and then it's like, oh,
and then Transformers took over.
Yeah. And then it's just, it's over. They've won again. Dang it.
Have you considered creating a bot that auto replies to questions in the comments based on all of the replies that you've created? Just throwing this out there. I just thought of this.
That's already happening. Yeah. For sure, email. I would like to do that, but I think some people are unaware of a certain feature of YouTube. Maybe, I don't know if you have it. I'm not sure who all gets this feature, but it has like these like automatic responses that you can make. Have you had that on your email or YouTube comments or anything? Have you seen those?
I think I have them. Yes, for comments, I get some suggestions sometimes.
And initially, those suggestions were not very good. But as time has gone on, those suggestions are quite good. I find myself clicking those fairly often. And that's another thing that, like, I think you could have a philosophical talk on for hours, because, like, what is the response? Like, is that actually you responding, or were you just like nudged to make your response using that language? Like, so like if we allow ourselves to like devolve into those, yeah, exactly. If we allow ourselves to click those buttons, are we talking anymore? Or at some point it's almost like the machines are just talking to each other, and like we're just watching it happen, So like sometimes I click them, but then sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know, man. I'm not sure I'm comfy yet with having that happen. Because when you click it too, it's like, he liked that response, and that goes into the model that they continue to train and churn. But then I think, what was the name of that? There was some Netflix documentary on the like social media. There's tons
Black Mirror?
on social media.
Some Black Mirror episode?
It was a documentary, but Black Mirror is a great show. I've seen every episode of Black Mirror. I definitely, that's one of the best shows on Netflix for sure. But no, it was a documentary. I can't think of what the name was, but anyway, the premise or the point that they were making was like, it's like this supercomputer that is like learning all about you, and like it's guiding you, and it's actually your learning. Like it's kind of like influencing you at that point. And so, yeah, I do worry about those kinds of things, like clicking those boxes, or like letting, like if it was a bot I wrote and I made, I might feel emotionally different than I do like just clicking Google's version, but it would be the same thing. It would just be like some machine has determined that this is a typical response I might make, but that's not true. On different days, like some days I'm a little saltier than other days. And so it's like, there is variety. Like I don't have a homogenous response to comments. Like it does vary. And so, yeah. yeah, I don't know. And like I said, I don't know what to think. Those comments for sure those have to be a GPT model. So they're definitely like, and right now they're pretty basic. Like the ones that you showed are kind of similar to the ones that I have. I've been getting some longer ones, but I can see those going into the future. Same thing with like email responses. Like sometimes I get like spammy emails, not spam, but like emails that I'm just like, no. And like the automatic response is like, no, thank you, or something like that. And I can click that, and I'll do that just to save time, but give the person a response so they stop pinging me. But otherwise, yeah, I kind of get nervous about those like automated things. I'm like, where does this lead? Like, because again, it's like with Grand Theft Auto, I can see where's that going. I can see, well, if that continues to improve, that goes to a really cool thing. But with these like automatic responses that you click, where's that go? Where's that headed to? I'm not sure I like where that's going. I'm not sure I want to be there. Like, I don't want to talk with people online and be like wondering, am I talking? It's like when you talk to, bots on, customer service, eventually it gets annoying because you recognize that bot doesn't understand what you're actually trying to say or ask. And I think like in the future, if we're just doing these like automated responses back and forth with each other, like at some point you're going to be carrying on a conversation with somebody and neither of you are even aware that it's happening. It's like, that's weird. I don't like that.
It's also about losing the personal touch. So I have a very small community and I really enjoy people leaving a comment and I try to talk to them. It feels like I'm not leaving these interviews out into a void and I'm actually talking to someone who's watched this. So I get to share that experience, at least for me. But for you, I understand that you can't reply to every single comment. So
well, definitely like with the comments, some of them I clip or I click when it's like a thanks or something like that. Like some of those are pretty good. But and then I usually like when I read a comment, I'll click the little heart button and that and people have accused me of automating that. And I'm like, no, that's me. I'm doing it. It's just I do it. It's like my red. Now, actually, I think now if you interact in any way with a comment, it'll filter it like when you go into like your YouTube community section or whatever.
yes, it does.
But a lot of time, yeah, but that's pretty new. Like it wasn't that way for very long. I feel like that's like within the last 1 or 2 months. And so historically, I've just used the little heart because I'll usually respond to comments on my phone. And so I'll just like pop open my phone and I'll just scroll down really fast until I get to until basically I start seeing that I've hearted comments. And then that's where I know I left off. So I'll just kind of go up from there. So yeah, I kind of feel the same way as you. I mean, I definitely at some point in certain channels, I think get a ton of comments, especially if you're doing like it's more so about like the number of comments that you get over a period of time, I think. So like if you're posting, a video a day that's getting millions of views, you're probably getting thousands of comments. Yeah, you'll never respond to all of those. You're not even probably reading all of those, So
You
just
physically can't with that amount of videos. You physically can't do that.
Yeah. But as long as you can, like I said earlier, like I kind of like people say don't read the comments, but I disagree with that. I think there's a lot of benefit to reading the comments as long as you don't get hung up on the negatives. Like if there's a negative comment and you can like feel it in your gut, you're like, oh, I don't want, like, you don't want to respond to them, but it hurts. You just remove the comment and it's like, oh, who cares? Like it's not a big deal. Like obviously you want to be careful. Like if someone has like a good criticism, I think you want to internalize that. Like, I think that's actually a good thing, but for sure, some people are just like trolling and some people are like legitimately crazy. Like if you get enough views, you're just statistically, you will get some strange people. So, that's definitely going to happen. Just move on. Just accept that it's going to happen. And that's it. But yeah, I think reading the comments and like interacting with your audience is good. And like, same thing with like the Discord. So like I see that comment all the time. People are like, I can't believe you're talking on Discord. It's like, well, we're just hanging out. Like, I just, why not? There's times where I'm not really busy or doing anything. And like, it's fun to come into Discord, especially like during COVID, like the pandemic and stuff, like when we were like all on lockdown and I like, after like I'm in like month 4, 5, 6, like I would just like, I'd go into voice chat and just like sit there and like wait for someone to like come down, and just hang out in voice chat, because it was like, oh man, this is just brutal, like not talking to anybody, you know? So yeah, I think getting like audience interaction is good, especially like on any like form of artwork or creativity, right? Like,
Yes.
don't you want to see your feedback? I mean, like, you want to know. To some extent, the likes and dislikes can probably give you a really quick assessment, but I don't know. There's a lot of like little stuff, like little tips and stuff that I've learned from reading the comment section. So I think it's beneficial.
And I agree with you. So like, I don't try to, people are, and you say this on your videos too, people are always so kind, and I don't want that going to my head. So whenever someone's like, hey, this is amazing, this is awesome, I just like it and leave it there. Hopefully no offense to anyone, I'm sorry if I don't reply. I just don't want that going to my head. But if it's a question or something like that, I probably try to interact.
Yeah, I think that might, I mean, I just got done saying like I don't listen to what other people say to do with comments, but I feel like I think like there was a time where like I just started ignoring those ones too. Like I might give them like the heart because I read it, but I just didn't really read them. But then you would read the negative one, and the negative one would piss you off, you know? And it's like, well, you're giving the negative one all the, so then you're like, all your focus is on the negative comments, and you're like ignored all the positive comments. So like to me, like I think if you're going to interact with your comments, you definitely want to like internalize them. Yeah, you want to like stay humble and stuff, but like at the same time, like don't ignore that. Like that's like such a source of positivity that like I wouldn't, especially if you're going to read the negatives. So I think everyone who's human, like when you see that stuff, like some of those things can really dig at you, and like occupy your mind. so like if you read the pod, like it's good to make at least have a balance, I think, of those things, because I think at least for me, like I'll focus on the negative if I'm not paying attention.
I want to touch upon next is, I know you've had some frustrating experiences recently with plagiarism, and at some point you mentioned you had 10, 12 income streams. How do you manage all of that? Because I know you love all of this stuff, you want to get to the exciting bits, but it's also your job to take care of all of these things. So how do you manage all of this?
At least like nowadays, I don't have like 10 to 12 income streams. And like, I'm not sure. I mean, there's times where I've had many of those income streams, and like arguably it probably is 10 to 12, and you just don't recognize it because you've got like maybe a sponsor here, and then you've got like there was like, I think like back in 2018, I was like, oh, you can make money on competitions. And like, so I did a lot of these like little competition things, and like that's all income. And so so like I don't, it varies, like it just varies a lot. Like I'm, every time someone asks me like what do you like, what are all the things that you do for a living, it's like, well, what year do you want to know about? Because it has varied considerably almost every year. It's really only like 2019, 2020, and now 2021 I've kind of focused more on trying to make more higher quality type of content on YouTube. Doing the neural networks from scratch book was like a lot of 2020. In like, it was like the end of 2019 when I saw the notes on neural networks from scratch, and I was like, oh, this could be a book. And then we kind of, and like that, like I never planned for that to be a book. It was just like, I think it was maybe November that I wanted to it was like the end of 2019 where we like decided, hey, we should make this book. And then I think it was like January of 2020 when the Kickstarter started, and then basically that ended in like February, I think.
Mhm.
And then basically like 2020 was like all about writing neural networks from scratch. Like the YouTube channel like took a huge hit because like I was making like a video like every 3 months or something like that. It was pretty bad. And so even like 2020 was like a lot less YouTube, mostly neural networks from scratch. And then now there's like a lot more YouTube. There's like more like kind of like sponsory type stuff. And then now I've kind of started looking into just a completely different side job, like a healthcare related thing. I don't really want to talk too much about that right now, but something else. And whereas like in like 2018, for example, I was doing a lot of like contract work. Like 2017, 2018, I did a lot of contracting and consulting. And so it really has just like varied a lot. And like, really, I just try to like, just like everything else, like I'm just trying to like find what do I like, what do I not like. And like with
You're
contracting and
optimizing
consulting,
for fun, if I may.
yeah, I think that's a great, yeah, that perfect. And like I like new things. Like I can't tell you how many times I've seen people say like, oh, you should be like a professor. And I'm like, well, I don't think so, because like if I was a professor, I'd be like mostly teaching the same thing over and over and over. And I don't want to do that. Like I like the liquidity of what I get to do, where like I can just up and decide one day, like, no, I want to do something else entirely. Like I can't, like now, like Daniel is with me full time. So to some extent, I can't just like drop him, but for the most part, like I don't see myself leaving programming. So like I'd like to always like he always has something, but will it always be that we're doing like the YouTube channel or pythonprogramming.net? Um, I don't really know that. And like those things are always changing. But I think the YouTube channel has kind of been a staple uh through the whole time. But yeah, just juggling everything. Like I don't know. I'm just always working on whatever I'm interested in at the time. Like there's not, I have like plans, like I make, some outlook plans and stuff like that, but I don't shy away from changing that plan. And usually it's like, if I have extra time to take on like an extra project or something like that, like then I'll take on that extra project, So, and that's how things stack up. Or I need the money. Like when I was first starting out, it was like, I got to plant as many seeds as possible so I can earn as much money as possible, just to survive. And so it does kind of like depend on like what my circumstances are. But yeah, I think it's just focus like doing things that I'm interested in. I mean, at the end of the day, that's really all it's ever been, is just trying to like find stuff that I'm interested in doing and trying them out for a little bit, see how that works, and then go from there.
And I just shared my screen to point out that as a professor, you'd probably be teaching a smaller class, and your channel has gotten close to 95 million views. Imagine putting those people on a screen, and just reaching to that audience is simply not possible while being a teacher in a classroom, if I may.
Yeah, and that's kind of been my argument for a while. And like same thing when like people want me to go to like a conference or something like that, and it's like, oh man, like a conference, you're going to spend a lot of time, energy, money going to a con. Like sometimes they'll fly you in even and like get your hotel, food, all that stuff. They might even pay you to go to the conference. But at the end of the day, I have to compare that to, okay, well, what if because essentially like especially if you're speaking at the conference, you're gonna plan for like likely a week, if not more, and then you go to the conference, and yeah, you might, at least at like some conferences, the networking connections that you might make there are tend to be higher value than just your average YouTube view. So I get that to some extent, but I'm not really a B2B business, right? Like that's not really what we do. So I just don't see, and that's why you see so many people at conferences who are from some business and they get to plug that business. And it makes sense for that, because that helps with networking. Now all these business people have heard that name before, and they've heard it in a good experience. Like it's a good strategy for people to be sent by their business to a conference. But for me, I'm just not sure, like I'm just not sure it makes sense to spend all that time doing stuff like that. And yeah, the same thing is true with like teaching a class. You're absolutely right. I wouldn't find that as fulfilling, I don't think, because yeah, like I remember I did a video around 700,000 subscribers. I haven't even done a video on like the million subs thing.
Yeah.
But like those numbers, those are like just insane numbers. Like for a programming channel, like the videos are not fun. Like that's not like they're interesting, but they're not like binge watchable. I mean, I get
To
it. Like
us, they are like to students or people who really enjoy that.
yeah,
Maybe to like I'm a part of that very small percentage though.
right. But exactly, it's a small group of people that are like, that want to spend their free time, because no one had, I mean, there's some places that like use my videos as like reference material, and I'm sure some people use it to teach, but for the most part, no one has to watch my videos. So it's your free time to watch them. And the fact that like a million people I'm sure there's some bots in there, but I know they filter out bots fairly frequently. So I think it's probably over time been about 1 million people have clicked that, like click subscribe. And then, yeah, like 95 million people who have watched. I'm sure a lot of those people click off at some point or didn't enjoy it, but it's in the tens of millions that I've reached. And like, I feel like you can't touch that with like anything. Like you could maybe like if you're a Twitter or a Facebook or something like that, you like made those things and you're reaching like billions of people. Like that's cool. I get that. But yeah, but for someone like me who's just like basically I've been by myself pretty much this whole time until I met Daniel and I brought him in, but for like the two of us, like to do stuff like that and get that kind of reach, like it's just not the same. Like there's just something so cool about doing that. And like I'm earning a living, everyone gets it for free. Like nobody, like at being a professor, I'm not thinking like, oh, they're paying. Am I doing like when people say like people will be like, will make comments that they didn't like a video or something like that. When I see that, I'm like, well, it's free. So you get your money back, like, I don't know. There's just like, I feel like, I think the reach is cool. And like, yeah, you could never get that, going to a conference or teaching as a professor at a school, but you would get a closer interaction. Like you would get more, like you would see people grow like individually. And so I think if you were a professor, you would get, like feedback in that way that I think is probably very valuable. I'm sure many professors, that's the value that they get, is they see the students grow and they like actually get to see it. Whereas like, I don't see my viewers grow at all. Like I don't have I don't have that level of interaction with them and I don't know how I ever could. So like, I don't get to see that. So I think, I'm sure it's just different strokes for different folks sort of thing where like, they get a value out of that. But yeah, for me, like I said, as long as YouTube is a viable thing, it's just so worth it. What a great proposition, I think.
And I mean, I'm sorry, I'm comparing you to me. I'll be comparing you to me, but you also gives the strength to people like me. So I've just started out in this area, and I'm learning myself. I'm trying to use this podcast as a way of learning myself. And initially, it was just a non-monetized service that I would run for the community. But now, at times, I'm getting enough sponsorship opportunities. I would just turn them down, but it also gives me the strength to just explore that, because if I have the money, I could probably make the channel a little better, probably hire an editor and just focus on different stuff. So you're also empowering people like me without knowing yourself, is what I was trying to get to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, like, I bet like the impact is even greater than you're even aware. But that's what I mean. Like, as a professor, you're like, I'm confident that people have grown
Yeah.
through watching the content. I know it's happening. I just don't see it. Like, I'm not aware of it. Whereas, like, yeah, like a professor throughout the course of a semester probably can actually like see it happen, like see people become better. So I think there's definitely meaning there for sure. It's just, yeah, like, the professor probably doesn't have a big YouTube channel, so yeah, they can't make the choice. But at least for me, it seems like the YouTube thing is, at least for me, a more fulfilling. Also, just like it's really fun for me. Like I said, I do whatever the heck I want, and that seems like a really good deal. So I like it.
So I've come to my second last question. This is always the a repeat question. You made a video on this. Don't worry, be hacky. But what's your best advice to someone in their journey, wherever they are in their journey?
What was the question?
What's the best advice to someone in their programming journey, wherever they are, programming or data science journey?
Oh, best advice to somebody like just trying to learn to program, or what? What do you mean?
Uh, Someone who's just started out or even trying to make progress, like any spectrum of learner.
Oh wow. Oh, that's a very general question. Um, I think I think probably it's just work on build things like I see this question all the time of like I need to, like, people ask for project ideas, and that's such a wild question to me. Like when I see somebody ask for a project idea, it's like, well, like it just doesn't compute. Like to me, just think about, um, what it is, like, why did you, like, when I see that question, I always ask, like, well, why did you learn to program? What did you hope to be able to do with programming? And okay, do that, right? Like that, like, I'm not going to give you project ideas. Like, these are things like you should be sitting around and they should just pop into your head and you just want those things to happen. Like, you want to make something a reality, and like, that's what your project should be. And so I think, at least for me, I have found all of my success in learning something by having something uh, that I actually want to achieve. Like, I almost like that, like my latest Python 3 basic series, what, like, my main attempt there was to show people, like, you just spend like 45 minutes on basic stuff and then get the heck out of here. Like, don't just stop learning the basics, because like, you'll learn to program.
Yeah.
Um, just do it. Just start building stuff. And like, you really don't have to be a great programmer to build really cool stuff. And like, that's kind of like, we kind of touched on it briefly, but like, that's how, at least for me, that's how I learned to program, was like, I wanted to do sentiment analysis. I didn't know how to do it, how to even get started. I didn't even know what language to choose, but there was the NLTK book. And I just went through that book, and that book kind of had, like, the first few chapters was like an intro to Python, but it was like an intro to Python kind of in the sense of like doing stuff with strings and just natural language processing. And like, boom, I learned Python that way. But I don't even know if I finished the first few chapters. It was just like, okay, so this is how I interact with Python. Cool. And I flip the pages and I go to like what I want to get to, right? And like, I don't think, and like, I see like a question a lot about like, can you give me a roadmap to becoming a, and I see these videos, like, people make videos because people want that content so bad. And it's like, there is no roadmap. Don't follow a roadmap. You're just wasting your time, because like, you're going to, no offense if you have a roadmap video.
I do not.
Okay.
I've considered them, but never made one for the same reasons.
Now you cannot. It's like, no one's roadmap will be the same. Like, you're not going to need all the same prerequisites. Now, there are certain things where like web development in Python was almost the hardest thing for me to ever learn, because like, harder, I think, than deep learning, even, because it was like, I didn't know, okay, which thing is the Python thing and which thing are we doing because of like WSGI or something. Like, I didn't know, like, I just didn't understand. And so like, to some extent, you have to have a foundation to like do certain things, for sure. But I think the best thing to do is just get out and like take steps. You just take one step towards your goal, take another step towards your goal, take another step. And like, certain goals might be so big that you have to split them up into little sub goals, but just take those steps. And each time you're confused or lost, you don't skip it. You stay there and you figure out what the problem is. And then you just continue on. And especially in this world where you could come to my Discord, you could go to there's like the programmers hangout, there's an official Python Discord, there's Stack Overflow. There's like literally no excuse to like move on from a question because you can't find the answer. You can definitely ask a question. Now, there's an art to asking questions, and you definitely don't want to be like, just solve my problem kind of question. But if you're just honest and like, you approach it like you're not just trying to abuse people to just like write code for you, then I don't know. I think that the best way to like learn stuff is to just simply do it. And so like, again, for me, I think most people would have told me, hey, don't do sentiment analysis. Like, that's like, what you're going to start programming with sentiment analysis? Like, what the hell? And I think but it was perfect for me. But is it going to be perfect for most of people? No. Like, what a terrible, like, most people are going to fall asleep thinking about those things. So it should just be like whatever you're interested in. So if you want to get into like data science, for example, like, okay, well, what do you want to do with data science? Right. And then like, if it's machine learning, cool. It's like, start working on stuff, especially like data science. I would go to probably Kaggle or some of these other places where you can like play with data sets and like literally learn from like a community of people and see what other people are doing. There's stuff like that. If you want to like do web development, go do web development. Like, go make some websites. Like, make a personal website, make like your like a portfolio website. You're going to need it probably. So like, make those things. or make other websites that you're interested in. If you want to make games, go work on games, but probably forget about Python, change the language. Yeah, I think I think that's probably that's my long-winded answer to advice.
I'll
Just
definitely. Sorry.
I just gonna say, just start coding. Just that's all. Just go.
After this call, I'm just going to write on my wall. So this is the studio. This is my work desk. But I'll write on the wall. There's no roadmap to what you love. That's such an amazing answer. I have a rapid fire for you. So I'll request you to answer in one word or one sentence. Is that okay? Are you ready for this?
Oh man, I don't know. As long as it doesn't have to be quick, I'm ready.
There no
Is it
rules.
one word or one sentence? I
Whatever
swear you
you want.
said
There are no rules. One word or preferably one sentence. You can go longer if you want.
okay. Let's do it.
Dream bike. Dream
What
motorbike.
was what? Say it again.
Sorry, the dream motorbike. If you had to.
Oh,
yeah.
Still the Daytona 675. That was my last motorcycle. It's the best looking, but I'm going to use way too many words now. But
Go for
the
it.
answer is one word: Daytona 675. The why is that it was a I want to say it was a 3-cylinder, but it would be like I've at some point they ruined it kind of. But the one that I had, I want to say was maybe a 20. What year would that have been? Maybe a 2007, 2006 is the one that I had. I just think it's the most beautiful. Yeah. I almost think of the one that's being shown might have even been it. But yeah, like I had a red one, just kind of like that. In my opinion, the best looking motorcycle, besides obviously like some of the Ducatis and stuff like that. But yeah, best looking, best sound, like the sound of that that bike. It had like this almost like this whistle to it, but not an obnoxious one. Oh, just the best sounding and best looking bike. Just the best one.
Awesome. Dream car that you'd want to race in. That's a hard one.
Yeah, that's really tough. It would have to be the track car that I have right now is a 911. It's a manual. It's like a 2009 manual 911S, and you can race that. Like you can race that at the club level. Everybody there has I forget what those are. There's a name for it. It's PDK, I think, but it's just paddles essentially. But it's like Porsche's version of paddles. So everybody you'd be competing against has PDK, and you'd be on manual. So it really isn't very fair. But it's the club level, so everybody sucks anyways. So probably I think that would be cool. That would be a cool car to race one day. But almost all race cars are really cool. So I just like, they're all just so like, just it's like planes. Like planes are just cool machinery, or even like computers, like cool hardware. Like I don't know, I think that there's just almost all of them are really cool. So I don't know, but probably the track car I have now, that'd be the coolest thing I think to race one day.
Awesome. You have a lot of fascinating stuff in your room. I've seen the Nord flamethrower. I've seen drones. What's your favorite thing in that room, if you had to pick just one?
Ooh. Well, now it would probably be the million sub golden plaque, or right at this present time, my favorite thing is the DGX station, but they're taking that away from me for some reason. I don't understand why. But
I don't either.
Man, that's tough. That's really tough. Possibly, well, behind all that stuff, there's like the smaller drones. I actually kind of like those. Those are like probably more fun they're definitely more fun to fly than like the larger drones. And those were all like built by me. And so they're kind of silly, but they don't have like nowadays you buy drones and they all fly really well despite wind conditions and all this. Like they're all just so smart. Whereas those drones, they go about 60 miles an hour and they have like literally no safety features. And they're absolutely wild.
Raw power unleashed.
Yeah. And so I think those are probably my favorite thing, because they're just absurd. Like I just bought the highest powered motors I could find and like just kind of soldered everything together and it works. But it takes so much skill, and there's no like FPV on those little ones. And so it's all fly by sight, or line of sight rather. And it's so challenging, especially like when anybody who flies drones, I'm sure understands, but like when the drone is not angled at a nice angle for you to understand, like you're doing all this math in your head to fly it. And then it goes so fast and it maneuvers so, like, the term I would use is violently. Like, it's so aggressive when there's like no safety features, no stability control stuff. Probably those, because they're really dumb. But the flamethrower is really dumb too. I think people probably don't recognize how gigantic of a flame there is. There is a video of it on my Instagram of like
I've seen it.
first time. I was like, oh my gosh, I almost like, if the tree above me was a little drier, it might have caught fire, because it was just like, that flame is so big. And like, even the video doesn't quite, like, I feel like it doesn't quite capture in person how big it really is. And so that's also pretty absurd. But my one word answer, small drone, or small dash drone.
Awesome. Final question. This is sometimes really hard for people. Favorite game of all time, or you could pick two, one for nostalgic purposes and one from the current releases. Favorite games.
Oh boy. Oh no. Okay, so the nostalgic game would have to be RuneScape, right? Like, that was just like my childhood. I learned, like, I learned about like online business. I learned about just business, and like, I learned so many things. Like, that game, I'm sure people who play MMO RPG games can probably relate. Like, you learn a lot about like people,
Yes.
and like all these like large social interactions, and then also like like scamming, like people, like I learned so much about online scams through that game. Like, and you see these scams all happen, like trust scams and exit scams and like all these things I learned as like a 12-year-old. Like, I experienced those at such a young age. And then now, like, especially with like crypto blowing up, like, we're rewatching all these people fall for scams that are like age-old scams. And these scams obviously existed before RuneScape, of course. But like, probably that game for nostalgia. And then for like current age, or like current games, ooh, that's tough. I probably, the game that comes to mind is Space Engineers, just simply because like I like the physics environment of that game, and like the building, and like the, like, I don't know, the strategy of building, I guess. And yeah, I think I'd probably go with Space Engineers for that. My only gripe with Space Engineers is like, you can't, you eventually want to build it so big. Like, you want to build a city, like, eventually. Like, it's basically a game, for anyone who doesn't know, you like build like, it's kind of like Minecraft for adults, for mature adults. And here come the dislikes. I hope you enjoy. Just kidding. We're all kids on Space Engineers as well. But yeah, it's like you build things like blocks at a time and stuff, kind of. And then there's enough engineering to it. It's not totally brutal engineering, but there is a lot of engineering aspects that come into play. Like, your ships, you have to build them intelligently. As you pick up supplies with those ships, they get heavier. You got to think about all these dynamic things. And I think that's just it's a cool game. It's probably a decently educational game. And it's fun to play with people. We got sidetracked. I don't know. We've gotten sidetracked so many times, but we went out, Daniel and I, and actually Daniel's the one that's building the server, and is like building like a dedicated Space Engineers server. So initially I was hosting Space Engineers. But getting back to GameGAN, the physics engine is, while very impressive on Space Engineers, it's like single threaded. So it's just like, it's such a struggle to continue building out and like having more dynamic environments and scenarios when the entire physics engine is a single thread. So anyway, so we were trying to like set up this like dedicated server with the strongest single thread CPU that you can get. So eventually, hopefully we'll have that again. We had like a kind of a Discord Space Engineers server for a little bit, and then we shut it down because it got so laggy. And then so hopefully this new one, I don't know when we're gonna finally like get it done and released, but we've done a lot of work kind of setting it up, and probably get back into that. So I wish somebody would come up with like a really good like game like Space Engineers, but focus more on like letting you build massively. And I know all the little 12-year-olds are like, that's Minecraft, but it's yeah, it's just not quite, I don't know, but I just can't, for some reason, I can't get behind Minecraft. It's definitely not the same as like Space Engineers, but but a game like somewhere like Minecraft, but just Space Engineers theme, I think maybe that would be the best. But for now, it's Space Engineers.
This has been such an amazing window into your life. The strange thing for me was you were talking in 1x speed. Usually I watch your interviews in 2x speed. Your videos in 2x speed. But apart from that, thanks for such an amazing conversation. For my audience, I'm sure they know already, but you Sentdex on YouTube, you Sentdex on Twitter as well, and pythonprogramming.net would be the best, I think, platform to connect with you. Any other places I missed?
I have Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, all of those are all Sentdex.
Awesome. Thanks so much again for your time and for such a transparent conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give it a review or feel free to shoot me a message. You can find all of the social media links in the description. If you like the show, please subscribe and tune in each week to Chai Time Data Science.